Welcome everyone, my name is Kevin Nelson and we are at another Catholic destination. Today we are in Los Angeles, California, and behind me is the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels. It is a beautiful and unique place of worship, quite an architectural achievement, and we're going to take you inside to see some of its beauty, and we're going to learn more about the process of how it all came to be. So please stay with us as we journey through the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels. The Los Angeles Archdiocese is home to over 4 million Catholics, and its cathedral is the centerpiece, the mother church for the Archdiocese. It is a place where the Archbishop celebrates the major liturgies of the year with clergy, religious, and laity. In a culturally diverse archdiocese such as Los Angeles, the cathedral is a welcome home to all peoples, a place of prayer for everyone. That is why when the old Cathedral of St. Viviana's was condemned in 1996, the Archdiocese was in desperate need of a new cathedral.
Well, in January 1994, we had an Northridge earthquake, and of course did tremendous damage throughout the Southland. We had actually in the Archdiocese about almost $70 million worth of damage, and included in that was the cathedral, the old Cathedral of St. Viviana, which after some engineering analysis and so forth, approximately 6 months later, the summer of '94, due to the damages to the cathedral, had to be closed. And at that stage, that put in motion the fact that we were going to have to build a new cathedral.
The process for the planning of a new cathedral actually began before the old cathedral was closed.
Well, actually, they had thought about building a new cathedral before that, and they had done some designs, cross designs, using the old cathedral as a transept. And but they had discovered that, again, not having enough land and so forth. So that had been going on maybe for 5 or 6 years prior to the earthquake. Plus also there was a donor willing to give a substantial amount of money to build a new cathedral.
One of the first and most important tasks for the whole process was to decide on the architect. There were many qualified and well-known architects who wanted the opportunity to design the new cathedral.
They hired an individual that was very involved in development in downtown, an Orthodox Jewish developer by the name of Ira Yellen. And he had approached the Cardinal in helping him to build a new cathedral because he was interested in developing the inner city here. And he was the one that assembled an eminent jury to select an architect to build a new cathedral. There were approximately 46 submissions of architects from all over the world. In that selection, they narrowed it down to 6 architects that they gave an exercise to. And the exercise involved taking a statue that's not too far from this site here. It was Juniper Serra next to Union Station. And each of these 6 architects had to address the statue in relation to the city, the situation of it in relation to the city, using light, sound, and connectivity to the urban setting. And from that exercise, they were going to narrow it down to 3 architects. There had been a committee selected prior to this who was monitoring the whole process. And in monitoring this, they were giving their input. So the final 3, basically, they had an interview with the committee, and based on that interview, the committee that the Cardinal had assembled, they selected Moneo. And he was selected because of his ability to take the old and bring it into the new. And the Cardinal was very interested in that because we were crossing the new millennium from 96 into the year 2000, and also his ability to use light.
On July 22, 1996, it was announced that a new site would be sought for the new cathedral. On September 14th, the Cathedral Advisory Board met with design architect Professor Jose Rafael Moneo to consider 8 possible sites. 6 of them in downtown Los Angeles. The board members walked the sites and decided upon the 5.6-acre site bounded by Temple Street, Grand Avenue, Hill Street, and the Hollywood Freeway. Moneo was not deterred by the site that overlooked the Hollywood Freeway. Just as many European cathedrals are built near rivers, Moneo considered the freeway as Los Angeles' river of transportation, the connection of people to each other. When Cardinal Roger Mahony announced the decision to relocate to the new site, he also announced that the title of Our Lady of the Angels would be the title for the new cathedral church. The title had already been confirmed by the Holy See and announced in 1945 by then Archbishop John Cantwell. September 4th each year is observed as her feast day and recalls the 1781 founding of the city. The official ground blessing ceremonies took place on Sunday, September 21, 1997. Construction on the site began in October of 1998 with work in the parking garage. Excavation for the foundations of the cathedral began in May of 1999. The complete construction process was quite an undertaking.
Well, the process of construction, again, there was a number of committees. In the overall committee group of 45, there were subcommittees. And in those subcommittees, there was a liturgical committee, there was an art committee, there was a committee for the residents, a committee for the centre, and each of these met on a regular basis at least once a month and gave input to the design of it. And of course also we had to hire an executive architect, which we did from the city, from Los Angeles itself.
The formal blessing and dedication took place on September 2nd, 2002. Moneo based his design of the cathedral on 2 central theological truths. The first is that the light of God is revealed in salvation history, especially in and through Jesus Christ. And the second is the sense of journey that people make on the pilgrimage towards redemption and ultimately the fullness of the kingdom of God in heaven. These themes of light and journey inspired the architect to choose natural light to flood the cathedral through windows filtered through Spanish alabaster.
Well, that's also an interesting story. That was probably one of the biggest changes that Moneo had to make. In his first submittal of a model, he had depicted the cathedral showing glass by Ellsworth Kelly, who is a famous American glass artist. And he has very bright stripes of red and greens and so forth. That was rejected by the committee, and then he returned at his next visit with the idea of alabaster. And alabaster is a translucent stone. It's Spanish in this case. It was the place where we would get the largest amount of alabaster, 27,000 square feet of it. And it was decided that that would give a warm, glow, comfortable feeling in the cathedral.
The exterior of this beautiful cathedral is very impressive. Professor Moneo has designed a dynamic, contemporary cathedral with virtually no right angles. This geometry contributes to the cathedral's feeling of mystery and its aura of majesty. As impressive as it is outside, the interior is a wonderful worship space that is filled with beautiful and inspirational art.
Again, we had a committee that interviewed each of the artists, and we made selections based on input from the committee. And the committee was, again, had a number of experts on it that was able to identify artists that we might be interested in. Once we had narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3, we usually had 3 to select from or to interview. Only maybe once where we had a sole source of a situation. But the difficulty was then with copyrights and contracts. That was the most challenging part of it, because we were pretty much insistent on having copyright control over each of the artists' part of it. The LA Times did an article on the amount of art, and they estimated that we have at least $3 million worth of art in the cathedral. It doesn't look like that, but when you probably start adding it up, it is quite interesting. The whole idea is that when you arrive at the site, there's a pilgrimage. And you begin your pilgrimage at the fountain in the lower plaza. And there you proceed to the great doors, and you're led into this long narthex that's supposed to lead you into the cathedral. And this is part of your pilgrimage in coming out of the outside into the great light of the cathedral. And as you proceed to the back of the cathedral along the narthex, and you turn to your right, then you perceive the cathedral in its great glory, in its great volume. And it's usually, the reaction is, no, it's awe, because you're surprised by the time you get to this turn, and you turn and you look towards the altar. It's one of the things that Moneo did from the simple instructions that he had received, was to reverse the cathedral itself. You come from the side of the altar rather than from the traditional narthex of a church straight in. You come from the side of the altar, and you're led through a pilgrimage past a number of chapels or shrines, and then you finally come to where you behold the cathedral.
The great bronze doors, situated on the southeast side of the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, were designed by the Mexican-born Los Angeles sculptor Robert Graham. Nearly 5 years in the making, they were built by some 150 artists. Beginning at the bottom of the inner doors, Graham has sculpted in relief a grapevine symbolizing the church. Folded in the grapevine are 40 ancient symbols that represent pre-Christian images from Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America. Progressing above the ancient part of the doors are different visions of the Virgin from images that are European in origin, but have been filtered through the indigenous cultures that the Europeans brought to Christianize the New World. They include such images as the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin of Guadalupe, the Pieta, Virgin of the Candlestick, Virgin of Mercy, and others. Above the pair of bronze doors contains the 8-foot image of Our Lady of the Angels. The modern figure is presented as a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. The halo shaft above her head shines God's light on her as the sun travels from east to west.
Well, it was pretty much determined from the beginning that since the cathedral was named Our Lady of the Angels, and by the way, that was just for this cathedral, even though it was granted to Archbishop Cantwell in the 1940s that he could rename the cathedral, this was the first time. So therefore they were going to do an image of Our Lady of the Angels. And we only interviewed 2 artists for that, and Robert Graham had volunteered himself at the very beginning to do the doors. He had offered this. So the committee, in interviewing the 2 people, selected him. And he had quite a challenge in deciding how he was going to depict Our Lady of the Angels. And this was probably the most challenging part of it with the committee, in convincing them that he was going to do an original piece of art. He claims, and he has told me this a number of times himself, that there's nothing original in the rest of the door. He has copied it, but this is the one original piece. And he depicts her as a very strong working woman, bare arms, and also she has a multi-ethnic image in the way she's portrayed. And he was very strong in his ideas that he wanted to give this idea of the Blessed Virgin rather than the very homely type of woman that we're used to.
The Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels contains 10 devotional chapels on the plaza level and 1 on the mausoleum level. Unlike most cathedrals, the chapels do not open to the nave. Rather, they are accessible from the south and north ambulatories, which surround the main body of the cathedral, thereby achieving a more peaceful setting for prayer. As you make your way up the ambulatory, you encounter on your right the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, which holds the bronze tabernacle. The large, angular bronze tabernacle, designed and fabricated by Max Demas, reminds us of the Jewish Ark of the Covenant. Chaffs of wheat, grape leaves, and clusters are sculpted on the tabernacle, representing the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. Installed at the end of the south ambulatory of the cathedral is the 17th century gilded black walnut Spanish Baroque retablo. The retablo is a shelf raised above the back of an altar to support ornaments, pictures, and statues from sacred history. The ornate woodwork can be traced to 1687. It found its way to New York and then to California, and had been at the chapel of the Queen of Angels Seminary next to the San Fernando Mission before being moved to the cathedral. The cathedral's 300-foot nave is the place for the gathering of the faithful. Fixed seating allows for 1,900 people and an additional 1,100 in movable seating, for a total of 3,000. In traditional style, the cathedral faces east, the direction of Jerusalem, the holy city, and the rising sun. Morning sun enters the cathedral through the great alabaster windows and continues through the day, bringing a constantly changing texture of light. Alabaster is not a man-made product, but a naturally occurring stone. It boasts an unusual translucency because it contains moisture and oil, in addition to various mineral deposits. The alabaster in the cathedral is shielded by an exterior layer of glass, covered with a protective film to control ultraviolet rays and heat. One of the striking features of the interior of the beautiful cathedral is the tapestries which line the sides of the nave, over the baptismal font, and on the altar.
Well, the idea on the tapestries came as a result of the testing for the acoustics. The original idea was to depict, they always had the idea to depict the communion of saints in the cathedral along those walls. However, it might have been in bas-relief or some similar type of depiction. But when the acousticians started checking the sound reverberation, one of them happened to mention, we need to have something to dampen the reverberation here, and he happened to mention, has anybody thought of tapestries? And this is how the idea of the tapestries came about. But the idea of the communion of saints was there from the beginning. And the story, of course, as it moves on, is that John Nava, as a portrait artist, was hired to depict the communion of saints in the cathedral, and the rest of it is history.
The tapestries created by artist John Nava for the cathedral are the largest collection hanging in a Catholic place of worship in the United States. Of the three tapestry groups, the most prominent is the Communion of Saints along the south and north walls of the nave. 25 fresco-like tapestries depict 135 saints and blesseds from around the world, including holy men and women of North America canonized by the Church. 12 untitled figures, including children of all ages, represent the many anonymous holy people in our midst. All the figures direct our eyes to the light of the great cross window above the altar where the Eucharist is celebrated. Nava, working with Bay Area artist Donald Farnsworth, developed a method of making weavable digital files of the tapestry designs. These final weaving files were then emailed directly to Flanders Tapestries in Belgium from Nava's studio in California. What would have taken in the 16th century decades to make, with scores of weavers and dozens of looms, took 20 months of designing and 2 months of weaving. The large stone texture patterns used in the background of the Communion of Saints are from actual scans of excavations of the Via della Rosa in Jerusalem from the time of the Romans. The 7 tapestries behind the altar depict a schematic map of the streets of Los Angeles converging with an overall circular cosmati pattern traditionally associated with the divine. Fittingly, a quote from the book of Revelation is sewn into the tapestries that reflects the union of God and man here and now as the New Jerusalem. They are inscribed with the words, "See, God's dwelling is among mortals. God will dwell with them. They will be God's people, and God will be with them." The altar is a beautiful centerpiece to the cathedral. Made of Turkish marble, it was fabricated, cut, polished, and shipped from Italy.
The altar was selected by the Cardinal, Cardinal Mahoney. He chose the design of it himself. He also chose the stone, and it was a very rare type of stone, and our stone people here had to do a lot of checking to see if they could find it. And it was discovered in Izmir, Turkey, and had to be quarried there and taken to Carrara, cut and polished and shipped here. The table of it weighs over 3 ton, which was a challenge in installing it. Also, the base is almost 3 ton, so the weight of the two components of the altar is a little over 6 ton. It's clad with 4 angels that's covered in gold plating. It's a very simple design. The Cardinal very much wanted to have a simple design. The idea is that it's a table, and it stands out, even though it's simple, it does stand out as the focal point of the cathedral because of its size. It is 8 feet by 10 feet, the table itself. It stands 39 inches from the floor.
The cathedra, or bishop's chair, is a basic chair that has 2 ebony arms extended outward as if to welcome the assembly. The back of the chair is composed of linked crosses which float in the framework. Each cross is made from different woods from around the world, symbolizing the various communities and ethnic backgrounds that compose the Los Angeles community.
The Cardinal particularly liked wood because it has a certain warmth to it. And we, in the process, again, with committees and so forth, decided that we'd have wood, pieces of wood from all the continents portrayed in both the cathedra, the deacon's chairs, and the presider's chairs, and the ambo. Now, as far as the cross, that's an interesting story also. The committee that was involved in that selected a Jewish artist who was to do the Christus on the cross. And he went to quite a bit of pains in studying the crucifixion. I don't recall the name of the doctor. He's a French doctor who has written a book on the crucifixion. He studied that carefully to give a depiction of what Christ might be on the cross. Also, he selected European sycamore as the wood that would be on the cross because it was the most likely type of wood that was used in Jerusalem at the time.
The crucifix is of human scale in order that it can be approachable and accessible to worshippers, especially when they kiss the feet of Jesus on Good Friday. The perspective is intentionally distorted so that there is a sense of awe that comes from looking up at Jesus. The hands are strong and the proportions are not exactly anatomically equivalent, but rather are meant to be expressionistic. On the mausoleum floor is St. Vibiana's chapel and adjacent shrine. The name of St. Vibiana was given by Pope Pius IX to St. Vibiana's Cathedral in honor of the Virgin and Martyr, whose remains had been buried in the Roman catacombs and were preserved in the original cathedral. She is the patron saint of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Though little is known about St. Vibiana, she is the focus of prayer and devotion for many believers who call on her intercession. The Crypt Mausoleum of the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels is located on the lower level across from St. Vibiana's chapel. It contains 6,000 crypts and niches for burials. The cathedral Crypt Mausoleum is the burial place for several cardinals and bishops who served the Archdiocese of Los Angeles since its founding. The crypts and niches are available for the laity, and the proceeds are used for an endowment to assure the financial stability of the cathedral for future generations. All of the Baroque Revival-style stained glass windows in the Crypt Mausoleum are from St. Vibiana's Cathedral.
There's an interesting story on the windows themselves. When the cathedral was built in 1876, it didn't have any windows, it didn't have a lot of money, and it wasn't until 1922 when they were able to afford to get stained glass windows. And they selected Franz Mayer of Munich to do the windows. And the story on it is we actually have discovered in the archives that they bought the first 12 windows, those magnificent windows, for the princely sum of $6,000. And they're now valued at over $100,000 each. They're hand-painted stained glass windows.
Our Lady of the Angels Cathedral, with its incredible design and reinforced structure, is in fact so well built that it is expected to last for hundreds of years.
We expect it to last at least 500 years. It's situated on 198 base isolators, and it will allow the cathedral a tolerance of 27 inches in every direction in the case of a major earthquake. There's a moat wall all around the cathedral, and that will allow the cathedral to move in a seismic activity that possibly might be up to 8.2.
Despite the engineering marvel that the cathedral is, it is so much more than a building. It is a church of God, for the glory of God. It is a tool to connect and come together as one people.
It is really built for the assembly, and this is what really makes it sacred, is the bishop surrounded by the assembly. It is the great mystery of Christ. The bishop is the unifying figure of the diocese, and it really was an empty piece of architecture, a beautiful piece of architecture until we dedicated it. That was the first time we filled the space, and it really is most vibrant when it has a full assembly. It is where the assembly is called to prayer. It's where the assembly is dispersed from, and that's what really makes it a sacred space. The special celebrations that we have there, the baptisms, the weddings, the funerals, the special ethnic celebrations.
It has taken some time from the inception of the idea for a new cathedral to the completion of Our Lady of the Angels. There have been many bumps in the road of the long process, but the incredible, beautiful results are a testimony to the many who were involved. Well, we hope you enjoyed our visit to the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, and hopefully you were inspired as we were by the beauty of this place. Quite an achievement for having all these people come together, the construction workers, the engineers, the architects, the planners, and all the artists to make this a wonderful place of worship for all the people of Los Angeles Archdiocese and beyond as well. We'd like to thank everybody here for their help in putting this together, especially Brother Hilarion for taking time to share his thoughts and knowledge of this beautiful cathedral with us. And we'd like to thank you as well for sharing your time with us today. My name's Kevin Nelson. I invite you to join me again next time as we travel to another Catholic destination.